The courthouse marble echoed with the sharp crack of Victoria's designer heels as she strutted past Daniel like he was furniture to be discarded. Her crimson lips curved into a smile that could cut diamonds, and her laughter, God, that laugh, rang through the hallway like breaking crystal. "Enjoy your crumbling castle, darling," she purred, not bothering to look back. "Maybe you can sell tickets for ghost tours." Daniel Blackwood stood motionless, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, watching his ex-wife collect her victory like a trophy. The settlement papers in his lawyer's briefcase told the story. Victoria had claimed everything: the penthouse overlooking Central Park, the beach house in the Hamptons, his tech company Blackwood Dynamics, the art collection, even the vintage wine cellar he'd spent decades curating. Everything except the one thing she'd never wanted: Ravens Hollow Manor. That decrepit eyesore, she'd sneered during mediation. Let him have his haunted house. It's fitting, really. A relic keeping another relic. Now, as reporters swarmed the courthouse steps like vultures, Daniel pulled his coat tighter against the October wind. His daughter Emma, 16 and fierce despite her small frame, pressed close to his side. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chaos of camera clicks and shouted questions. "Are we really going to be okay?" Daniel's weathered face softened as he looked down at the only person who'd stood by him through the divorce proceedings. Emma had her mother's, his late first wife's, gentle eyes and stubborn chin, nothing like Victoria's calculating beauty. "We're going to be more than okay, sweetheart," he murmured, guiding her through the crowd. "Trust me." Behind them, Victoria posed for photographers, her new boyfriend's arm wrapped possessively around her waist. Marcus Sterling, tech mogul, and Daniel's former business partner, the man who'd helped orchestrate this entire betrayal. "Mr. Blackwood," a reporter thrust a microphone toward him. "How does it feel to lose everything you built?" Daniel paused. On the courthouse steps, the autumn sun casting long shadows across his face. For a moment, those who knew him well might have glimpsed something dangerous in his steel-gray eyes, a predator's patience. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "losing everything is just another word for freedom." The taxi driver kept glancing in the rear-view mirror as they wound up the mountain road toward Ravens Hollow Manor. The ancient oaks pressed close on either side, their branches intertwining overhead like gnarled fingers blocking out the dying light. "You sure about this address, mister?" the driver asked, his Brooklyn accent thick with skepticism. "This place looks like it should come with a warning label." Emma peered out the window at the looming silhouette of the manor house. Even in daylight, Ravenshollow looked like something from a Gothic novel, all twisted spires and crumbling stone with ivy that strangled the walls like desperate hands. "It's home," Daniel said simply, handing the driver cash. "Keep the change." As the taxi's taillights disappeared down the mountain road, father and daughter stood before the imposing iron gates. The wrought iron roses that decorated the entrance had long since rusted, their thorns now more menacing than beautiful. Emma shivered. "Dad, it really is creepy. Victoria wasn't wrong about that." Daniel's smile held secrets. "The best hiding places usually are." The main door's hinges screamed in protest as they entered. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of fading sunlight that sliced through grimy windows. The air smelled of old wood, mildew, and something else, something metallic, and cold that seemed to emanate from deep within the house's bones. "The electricity still works," Daniel said, flipping a switch. Ancient chandeliers flickered to life, casting dancing shadows on peeling wallpaper. "I've been paying to maintain the essentials." Emma wrinkled her nose. "Define essentials." "Heat, power, and most importantly—" Daniel paused at a door that looked no different from any other closet door in the mansion. "Privacy." What Emma didn't know, what no one knew except Daniel himself, was that 15 years ago, when Blackwood Dynamics was booming and he was married to his first wife, Sarah, he'd converted Ravenshollow's basement into something extraordinary. The contractor he'd hired, a discreet man named Garrett, who specialized in special projects for wealthy clients, had asked no questions when Daniel requested a vault that could withstand natural disasters and human greed alike. The work had taken 8 months, disguised as historical restoration for anyone who asked. Over the following years, Daniel had quietly moved portions of his wealth into that vault, not from paranoia, but from the hard-won wisdom of a man who'd built an empire from nothing. He'd seen too many fortunes disappear overnight, seized by governments, dissolved by lawsuits, or stolen by those closest to their owners. Cash, gold, precious stones, rare artifacts, all of it carefully selected, documented and stored in climate-controlled perfection. By the time he'd married Victoria 5 years after Sarah's death, the vault contained enough wealth to rebuild his empire 10 times over. But Victoria had never visited Raven's Hollow. She'd found the manor depressing and beneath her standards. She preferred the glittering penthouses and exclusive resorts where she could be seen by the right people. It was, Daniel now realized, the only smart decision she'd ever made. "Emma," he said, his hand resting on the closet door handle, "what I'm about to show you stays between us. Can I trust you with a secret?" His daughter's eyes widened, but she nodded solemnly. "Always, Dad." The closet door opened to reveal not shelves and hangers, but a steel staircase descending into darkness. Motion sensor lights clicked on as they descended, illuminating walls lined with reinforced concrete. At the bottom, Daniel approached what looked like an ordinary wooden panel. He pressed his palm against a specific section, and hidden biometric scanners hummed to life. A section of the wall slid aside with mechanical precision, revealing a gleaming steel vault door. "Dad," Emma breathed, "what is this place?" "Insurance," Daniel replied, spinning the combination lock with practiced ease. "Against people like Victoria." The vault door opened with a whisper, and Emma gasped. The room beyond looked like something from a museum or a dragon's hoard. Gold bars stacked like building blocks caught the LED lighting, while display cases held gemstones that refracted rainbow fire across the walls. Neat stacks of currency filled shelves, and velvet-lined drawers contained rare coins and jewelry that belonged in royal collections. Emma stepped inside, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. "How much is in here?" "Enough to buy back everything Victoria took," Daniel said, "and enough to make sure she regrets taking it. But revenge, like fine wine, required patience to reach its full potential." For the first month after the divorce, Daniel played his part perfectly. He was seen in town, shoulders slumped, buying groceries with careful attention to prices. He drove his old pickup truck instead of the luxury cars Victoria had claimed. To all observers, he looked like exactly what Victoria had intended: a broken man clinging to the ruins of his past. Emma proved to be an excellent actress. At her private school, she'd let slip to classmates that money was tight now, that her father was struggling to adjust. The gossip mill of elite society churned eagerly, each retelling adding fresh humiliation to Daniel's supposed downfall. Meanwhile, Victoria basked in her victory. Social media posts showed her in designer gowns at charity galas, Marcus Sterling always at her side. She'd kept Daniel's last name professionally. Blackwood carried weight in business circles, but made sure everyone knew she was moving on from her unfortunate marriage. What she didn't notice was that Blackwood Dynamics was beginning to stumble under her leadership. Victoria had beauty, charm, and cunning, but she'd never understood the technical complexities that made the company profitable. The quarterly reports grew increasingly creative as accountants tried to mask declining revenues. From his crumbling manor, Daniel watched it all unfold with the patience of a chess master. Each morning, after driving Emma to school in his battered truck, he would return to Raven's Hollow and descend to his vault. A few gold bars here, some rare diamonds there, never enough to be missed from the vast collection, but sufficient to fund his true plans. His first investment was in a small artificial intelligence startup run by MIT dropouts working out of a Boston garage. The technology they'd developed would revolutionize automated trading, but they needed capital to scale. Daniel provided it through a shell corporation, taking a silent partnership that would soon prove extraordinarily valuable. Next came a failing shipping company in Delaware. The CEO owed Daniel a favor from years past, and the company's underperformance was due to poor management rather than poor fundamentals. A strategic injection of capital and a change in leadership transformed it into a logistics powerhouse. By Ith. The third month, Daniel's hidden investments were generating returns that dwarfed his old salary from Blackwood Dynamics. But more importantly, they were building the foundation for something Victoria could never touch, a business empire that existed entirely outside her knowledge or reach. Victoria's first sign of trouble came during a board meeting in January. The Yamamoto contract fell through, announced CFO Richard Chen, his usually steady voice strained. They're saying our latest software update corrupted their entire database. Victoria's manicured fingers drummed against the mahogany table. Around her, the faces of board members, men who'd once deferred to Daniel's expertise, showed barely concealed skepticism. Fix it, she said curtly. Whatever it costs. Victoria, Richard said carefully. It's not just about money. Our reputation is taking hits we can't afford. 3 major clients have terminated contracts this month. From his office window across town, Marcus Sterling watched the first snowfall of winter dust the city streets. His own company was thriving, boosted by several key contracts mysteriously redirected from Blackwood Dynamics. But Victoria's increasing desperation was becoming a liability. Maybe, he'd suggested over dinner the night before, you should consider selling the company while it still has value. Victoria's green eyes had flashed dangerously. I didn't fight to get Blackwood Dynamics just to give it up. Daniel built something valuable even if he was too weak to protect it. What she didn't realize was that Daniel's strength had never been in holding on to things. It was in knowing which battles to fight and which to appear to lose. By March, the financial bleeding at Blackwood Dynamics had become impossible to hide. Vendors demanded payment in advance. Key employees jumped ship to competitors. The stock price, once a source of Victoria's pride, dropped so low that day traders began betting against it for entertainment. Emma noticed the change first. At school, the whispers about her family's financial troubles stopped. Instead, she overheard fragments of different conversations. Did you hear about Victoria Blackwood's company? My dad says she's about to lose everything. Maybe she shouldn't have been so cruel to her ex-husband. Karma's a witch. That evening, Emma found her father in the manor's restored study, a room that now looked nothing like the decay that surrounded it. Rich leather furniture, modern computers, and artwork that definitely hadn't been there during the divorce proceedings. Dad, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. Kids at school are talking about Victoria differently now. Daniel looked up from the financial reports spread before him. Each page represented another investment, another successful venture, another step toward the comeback he'd been carefully orchestrating. People love a rise and fall story, he said mildly. Almost as much as they love a comeback. Is that what this is? A comeback? Daniel's smile held the warmth of a father and the cold satisfaction of a predator. Emma, what I'm about to do isn't a comeback. It's a resurrection. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning that would forever change the business landscape of the city. Press releases went out simultaneously to major financial publications. Phoenix Global Investments emerges as major player in AI and logistics. Sectors. Mystery investor reveals billion-dollar portfolio built in absolute secrecy. Daniel Blackwood returns, from divorce court to boardroom domination. The financial district erupted in chaos as reporters scrambled to piece together the story. How had a man supposedly bankrupted by divorce secretly built an investment empire worth more than his original company? Where had the capital come from? And most importantly, how long had he been planning this? The press conference was held in the penthouse of the Meridian Tower, the city's most prestigious business address. As reporters and camera crews filled the space, Daniel stood at floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city that had counted him out. He wore a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's cars, his silver hair perfectly styled, his presence commanding the room with quiet authority. At his side stood Emma, now 17 and radiant in a navy dress that spoke of understated elegance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel began, his voice carrying the weight of vindication, "they say that adversity reveals character. I'd like to suggest that it also reveals opportunity." The room hung on every word as he detailed Phoenix Global's investments, the AI company that had just signed a deal with the Department of Defense, the shipping company that now controlled East Coast logistics for 3 major retailers, the dozen other ventures that collectively represented the future of American business. "Some of you will ask where the capital came from," Daniel continued, allowing himself the faintest smile. "The answer is simple. I never put all my eggs in one basket. While others focused on what they could take, I focused on what they couldn't see." In the back of the room, a young reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Blackwood, do you have any comment on the situation at Blackwood Dynamics?" Daniel's expression remained neutral, but those who knew him well caught the predatory glint in his eyes. "I wish my ex-wife the best in all her endeavors. Business can be challenging for those who lack the proper foundation." Across town, in the failing offices of Blackwood Dynamics, Victoria watched the press conference on a wall-mounted television. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was viewing her ex-husband's triumph from the company she'd fought so hard to steal from him. "Turn it off," she snapped at her assistant, but her voice lacked its former authority. The confident woman who had laughed in that courthouse 8 months ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked hollow, desperate, and utterly outmaneuvered. That afternoon, as stock in Phoenix Global's holdings soared and Blackwood Dynamics faced delisting proceedings, Victoria made a call she'd sworn she'd never make. Daniel answered on the first ring. "Hello, Victoria. We need to talk." "I'm afraid my schedule is quite full these days. Phoenix Global requires considerable attention." "Daniel, please." Her voice cracked slightly. I made mistakes." "Yes," he agreed mildly. "You did." The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of choices made and prices paid. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "Nothing," Daniel replied. "That's the beautiful thing about freedom, Victoria. When you don't need anything from someone, you hold all the power." 6 months later, Emma stood beside her father on the restored terrace of Raven's Hollow Manor. The ancient stones had been cleaned and repaired, the gardens brought back to life, the entire estate transformed into something that belonged in architectural magazines rather than horror films. "You ever feel bad for her?" Emma asked, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. Daniel considered the question, as he had many times since that courthouse day. Victoria had lost everything: the company, the penthouse, even Marcus Sterling, who'd abandoned her the moment her assets became liabilities. She now worked as a real estate agent in a mid-tier firm, driving a used Honda and living in a 1-bedroom apartment. "I feel sorry for the woman she could have been," he said finally. "But not for the woman she chose to be." Emma nodded, understanding beyond her years. "And the money in the vault?" "Still there," Daniel smiled. "All of it. Phoenix Global is entirely self-sustaining now. The vault was just the seed. Everything that's grown from it belongs to the future." As night settled over the mountains, lights began to twinkle in the valley below. Somewhere down there in her small apartment, Victoria was probably scrolling through social media, seeing the endless coverage of her ex-husband's continued success. The man she'd mocked as a relic now graced the covers of business magazines, as a visionary who'd revolutionized multiple industries. But Daniel didn't spare her much thought anymore. Revenge, he'd learned, was best served not as a dish, but as a life well lived. The greatest victory wasn't in Victoria's downfall. It was in the empire he'd built, the daughter he'd raised, and the knowledge that he'd protected what truly mattered. Raven's Hollow Manor. The lights in the study burned late into the night as Daniel planned the next phase of Phoenix Global's expansion. In the vault below, $150 million in various forms waited patiently, a reminder that the most dangerous man in any room is the one whose true resources remain hidden. And sometimes, the greatest strength lies not in showing the world what you have, but in letting them believe they know what you've lost. After all, you can't take what you can't see, and you can't defeat what you don't understand.